more volume is not better. Better volume is better. It's not just about more. That's a fucking super old-fashioned, outdated, bro, uneducated approach to like, you gotta fucking rip the muscle off the bone, bro. You gotta fucking go in there and do 30 fucking sets and fucking show your chest who's boss, bro. And fucking force it to grow, man. Here's the thing. The optimal amount of volume is different depending on the person, but it's pretty easy to figure out. Like, it's pretty simple to figure out, and I'm gonna explain how to do that today in as simple, useful, applicable terms as possible. So the thing about volume, and I'm not gonna get super nerdy with this, but it exists on a graph. And basically what I mean by that is that there is a point of diminishing return where volume stops creating more growth. Every single working set is going to increase the growth stimulus, but it's also going to produce fatigue. And so eventually, the fatigue that is produced by the number of working sets you've done is going to outweigh the growth that you would have triggered by it. And so you don't get growth, you just get fatigue. And that's why, like, more volume in terms of working sets, more working sets is going to equate to more growth up to, like, let's just use an arbitrary number, up to like 6 working sets. And then after 6 working sets, so let's say like 4 working sets, 5, 6, and then after 6 working sets, it's gonna be 7 working sets, 8, 9, and you're either gonna plateau in terms of your growth, or you're actually, in some cases, depending on how much more volume over what's optimal you do, you're actually gonna see less growth because you're creating more muscle damage, you're creating more fatigue than your body can recover from, and then you're not gonna be creating any growth. And we all know that growth happens when you're recovering, not when you're training. So the idea that you just go in and annihilate a muscle, like just constantly annihilate a muscle to force it to grow, doesn't make any sense. And that's not even like complicated science or complicated mechanisms or anything. That's just fucking common sense. Like, we know you recover, you grow during recovery, you grow outside the gym. So why would just constantly hammering a muscle in the gym create more growth? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. That's definitely a PR though, on that movement.
I've seen them come, and I've seen them go. I've seen things that beat people that nobody knows. I'm talking in pictures.
All right, so like I said earlier, everybody's point of diminishing return, everybody's sweet spot, kind of where more sets is not going to create more growth and it's actually just going to induce more fatigue. Everybody's spot at that, everyone's point is different. And that's because so many things influence that point, so many variables like genetics, training frequency, lifestyle outside the gym, training intensity, all that kind of stuff. And so there's tons of things that are going to influence that, and that's really why it's not a simple answer. That's why, when people ask me on Instagram, like, how many sets for this muscle group, I can't tell you. I have to know all these details, even some things I didn't already mention. And you can get a general idea, from some studies, but research is limited. For example, everyone knows the typical, like, oh, you need 10 to 20 sets per week if you want to progress. Those values like that, those numbers were generated by studies where they weren't training to failure, or where they weren't taking adequate rest between sets. And we know both of those things are important for maximizing your growth stimulus and optimizing your progress. So we can't really use those data points, or we can't really use those numbers. So, honest to God truth, I know this is going to be kind of underwhelming, but the best way, and really the only way to know for sure if your volume is optimal or appropriate, is through trial and error. I know you're going to be like, wow, Evan, that's fucking really groundbreaking, dude. Thanks for wasting my time. But I'm not wasting your time. I'm serious. This is how I do it myself. It's how I do it with all my clients. There's no other way to account for all the different variables in your life that are specific to you that are affecting your volume. And so that's why it's really important that you don't do a different workout every time you go to the gym, and you don't do a different amount of volume every time you go to the gym, and you don't train 5 days a week, 1 week, and 7 the next, and then 3 the next. You have to try and keep as many things as consistent as possible, so that when you're making progress, you know for sure that it's because your volume is in a good range, and not because, like, you ate more food last night, or you took extra rest and you're not as fatigued, things like that. And that's why I know it sounds super simple, but that's why that's the best way to do it, because there's no other way to account for all those variables. No study is going to be able to provide the data that is better than the data that you're going to derive from your own circumstances that you are trying to apply your findings to.
I seen Satan coming, honey, in a big white Cadillac. You better run. Baby, you better run. Oh yeah. I gotta play like lightning. Silver bullets in my gun. Light it up. There's not a moment to spare. It's quite a drop from the top. So how you feeling down there? It's a cold, cruel, harsh reality. Caught, stuck here with your enemies. Who do you think you are? Tearing us all apart. Where did you think you could go? 'Cause everyone already knows it's 20 to 1. Yeah, so you better run. You got the world on its knees. You're taking all that you please. You want more, but you get nothing from me. You like the burden we bear. You love the hate that we share. You want more, but you get nothing from me but enemies. Enemies. You started something that you just couldn't stop. You turned the ones that you love into the angriest mob. And the one last wish is that you pay for it, and there's no way you're getting out of this. Who do you think you are? Tearing us all apart. Where did you think you could go? 'Cause everyone already knows it's 20 to 1. Yeah, so you better run.
So there's a couple things, a couple general principles that we can kind of consider when we're trying to figure out which way our volume needs to go. So for number one, if you train very intensely, like you're going to failure, you're going past failure, which is actually impossible to do, but that kind of thing, then you need less working sets. And so let's just assume, you're not seeing growth or progress with a specific movement, and you train that movement really fucking hard, you probably need to pull back, not add sets. If you're an advanced lifter, you can probably assume that you need to pull back on your volume, like drop it. Because advanced lifters recruit more motor units more efficiently. They're able to train closer to failure, whereas beginners probably, obviously a beginner doesn't really know where failure is. It's usually difficult to kind of get a beginner to train to actual failure, that kind of thing. So generally speaking, more advanced lifters tend to require less volume and tend to be able to tolerate less volume. And that just comes down to not necessarily how long you've been training, but like how developed you are. So those two things generally suggest to pull back on volume. If you are really, really on top of your lifestyle factors, your diet's perfect, it's consistent every single day, your sleep's perfect, it's consistent every single day, you're not a stressed out individual, you live a really chill life, you may be able to add some volume. Generally speaking, that kind of thing, like your lifestyle factors, isn't going to allow you to do more volume per se, or at least your optimal amount of volume is not going to necessarily be more, but you'll be able to recover a little bit better, so you should be able to tolerate a little bit more volume. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. But obviously, if you're like on the other end of the spectrum and you're in a deficit and you're super stressed out and you're not sleeping well, probably not going to be looking to add more volume because your recovery is probably shit. The other thing is the types of exercises that you're doing. So shortened position movements, like a leg extension is a shortened position movement for the quads, are going to produce less fatigue because I'm not going to get into the nerdy shit, but basically they don't produce as much calcium ion production or fatigue. And so a shortened position movement, if you're not progressing on it, you might want to add some sets to that movement. Whereas if you're doing a lengthened position movement, it would be more likely than, at least with a shortened position movement, that you probably need to pull volume back. So let's say like a hack squat, for example, you don't necessarily, if you're already doing 2 sets of hacks, which is a good amount, you're trained to failure and all that kind of stuff like we've talked about before, then you probably don't need to add more sets of hacks. Whereas leg extensions, if it's not moving, there's more of a justification there for adding sets for leg extensions. So those are just some basic principles you can kind of consider when you're trying to decide like, okay, this movement has not progressed for this long. Should I add sets or take away sets? The other thing that I would say is just generally speaking, it's always better to start with less, because at least then if you like drop sets off and you're not making progress, you're not feeling like shit at the same time. You know what I mean? So if you went the other way and you did more volume, you're probably going to feel like shit outside of the gym because you're just more fatigued, more tired, and you're not making progress, right? So it's probably better, just in terms of enjoying your life outside the gym, to drop sets and then build your way up rather than increase sets and then gradually pull back. Those are just some things that really go into volume, what dictates what's optimal for different people, which way you might want to take your volume. But the most important thing, like I said, is just making sure you're being very consistent, you're tracking as many variables as possible, and you're keeping them as consistent as possible, and then adjusting accordingly. So I hope this video helped you guys understand volume a little bit better. I get that question all the fucking time, so I just wanted to make a video that's kind of long form, goes into a little bit of the depth of stuff while keeping it entertaining, getting a workout in and stuff. And I hope this clears some things up for you guys who are kind of wondering about volume. So I'll see you guys in the next vid.